working. It's Express Employment Professionals in Scranton, where Julie used to work 5 or 6 years ago. And every once in a while, I get to overhear one of our staffing consultants doing an interview for a person who needs a job. And I overheard the interview a couple days ago, and one of the standard questions that they ask to people as we try to place them in the job that they need to be placed in is there anything that you want to avoid? Like, do you want to avoid, extreme cold, extreme hot? We want to put you where you want to be, not where we want you to be. So we just asked that general question. And so Ashley was interviewing somebody, and she said, is there anything you want to avoid? And without missing a beat, this guy said, drama. And I was walking by, and I'm like, I just chuckled. We both chuckled. And we're like, yeah, most of us want to avoid drama. But as we've been in the Old Testament here for a couple weeks, and we've talked about the first 2 humans that were created, the first family possessed a lot of drama, didn't they? And we're going to talk about the first 2 sons of Adam and Eve this morning. But first, I want to point out something very important that we often rush past, and it's this: why Adam and Eve were driven from the garden. It seems harsh. It seems like an adolescent punishment, like go to your room. But I want you to listen to the reason that God gave to them at the end of Genesis 3. It was so that Adam would, quote, not be allowed, listen to this closely, not be allowed to reach out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. What's up with that? What looks like a punishment was actually a very gracious act from God. Why? Because God knew what Adam and Eve would be tempted to do. They would attempt to atone for their own sin by rushing back to the center of the garden and gorging themselves on the right tree, the fruit from the tree of life. Perhaps they thought to themselves, we picked the wrong tree the first time. Don't worry, God, we won't make that mistake again. We'll go back and we'll pick the right tree. We will cover up our bad by doing what? Good. Sounds logical, right? Think for a moment, though. That's what we tend to do, isn't it? We compensate for the wrong we do by then doing a lot of right. We cover up our bad by doing good. We eat lots of ice cream, pizza, and donuts, and then we feel like we need to eat salad, nuts, and veggies for the next month, right? January 1st rolls around, and we start an exercise program. Why? We are atoning for all of our holiday indulgences. We have a fight with the wife, so we bring home flowers. We have an argument with the husband, so we cook him his favorite meal. And when we knowingly do something that is in rebellion to God, instead of confessing and repenting and accepting the grace and mercy that he so desperately wants to give us, what do? We double up on our Bible reading and prayer and our church attendance to soothe our guilty conscience. I'm not saying that we shouldn't start to do right after we've done something wrong, but we need to check our internal motivation for doing so. Is it because we really want to get close to God again? Or is it because we need to tip the scales back in a good direction? And when the scales are tipped the wrong way, we tend to pile on the good, so now it tips in our favor. And on the surface, you may ask, what's wrong with that? And again, there's nothing wrong with stopping doing what's wrong and starting to do what's right. But there's a huge difference between a change of behavior and a change of heart. There's a gigantic difference between changing your behavior to reinstate your own reputation in the eyes of others and in the eyes of God, and allowing God to actually change your heart through an inner conviction that leads to repentance and confession and true change. So I believe that God was actually keeping Adam and Eve from trying to cover up their bad by doing good, because that is nothing short of trying to save ourselves. You see, God didn't want Adam and Eve to rush back to the tree of life like a good little boy and a good little girl and start proving themselves. Start demonstrating that they could now make the right choice. In God's graciousness, there was no way he wanted them to live forever. I mean, he said that in the verse that I quoted earlier. He didn't want them to live forever in their present condition. To live forever in their fallen condition would be way too much to bear. Death, in a sense, is God graciously removing us from the weight and the curse of this world and the weight and the curse that we brought upon ourselves. Does that make sense? So often that just rushes right past us. I want that to make sense to us today. That covering up your bad by doing good is kind of like from the enemy's playbook. It takes God right out of it. Covering up your bad by doing good is exhausting. It has religious false self written all over it. And it's really nothing short of self-atonement. The tree of life is not enough. Actually, the tree of life is only mentioned 2 other times in Scripture. Interestingly, isn't it? One time in the book of Proverbs, and it doesn't come back into full play until God begins to make everything new in the book of Revelation. And then the tree of life has the spotlight on it again. What is enough for us now is the way and the truth and the life, which is Jesus. And the story that is unraveling here at the very beginning is not a story of how we can fix ourselves. It's a story of how God himself atones, of how God himself amends and repairs and makes the necessary changes on our behalf, but with our cooperation. Does that make sense too? Okay. So let's go into the drama that continues in the life of Adam and Eve's first 2 sons named Cain and Abel. They are a picture of how each of us struggles with our own disposition. And here's what I mean by that. We all struggle with our own character, our own nature, the way that we are bent, okay? The disposition that we have as we start off in life. Will we incline ourselves to God? Will we dispose ourselves to God? Or do we more naturally kind of incline and dispose ourselves to self? And Abel and Cain are 2 pictures of how we tend to bend ourselves. So let's get into that story. Genesis chapter 4. I'm going to read the first 16 verses so that we can get a good context for this. Genesis 4, 1 through 16. Adam lay with his wife Eve, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Cain. She said, "With the help of the Lord I have brought forth a man." Later she gave birth to his brother Abel. Now Abel kept flocks, and Cain worked the soil. In the course of time, Cain brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering to the Lord. But Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. The Lord looked with favor on Abel and his offering, but on Cain and his offering he did not look with favor. So Cain was very angry, and his face was downcast. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what's right, will you not be accepted? But if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it." Now Cain said to his brother Abel, let's go out into the field. And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother and killed him. Then the Lord said to Cain, "Where's your brother Abel?" "I don't know," he replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" The Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are under a curse and driven from the ground, which opened its mouth to receive your brother's blood from your hand. And when you work the ground, it will no longer yield its crops for you. You will be a restless wanderer on the earth." Cain said to the Lord, "Oh, my punishment is more than I can bear. Today you are driving me from the land, and I will be hidden from your presence. I will be a restless wanderer on the earth, and whoever finds me will kill me." But the Lord said to him, "Not so. If anyone kills Cain, he will suffer vengeance 7 times over." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain so that no one who found him would kill him. So Cain went out from the Lord's presence and lived in the land of Nod, east of Eden. Again, no way to fully unpack everything that's here, but we'll unpack a few of the suitcases. A couple background things first, just so we can get a better grasp on this. Cain, the older brother, he worked the ground in harvesting fruits and vegetables. Okay? Abel, the younger brother, decided he wanted to be a shepherd and work with animals. Neither one of those professions was a wrong choice. Lots of people are trying to figure out, what was the big disparity here between Cain and Abel? Maybe it was because, Abel chose to be a shepherd and Cain chose to be a gardener, and we just can't split hairs like that. In fact, God is spoken of in scriptures as being both a shepherd and gardener. All right? So we really can't use that as trying to divide exactly what happened here between Cain and Abel. They both chose professions, probably the only 2 professions that were on the face of the earth at that time. Okay? Being a gardener or being a shepherd. Okay? Nothing wrong with either one of those. We're not sure whether God had given instructions on what was called here an offering to the Lord. We don't have written instructions at this point about what they were to offer or not to offer. Cain and Abel probably possessed this internal awareness that offering something back to their Creator was the right thing to do. Offerings are usually motivated by some type of gratefulness and thankfulness. And whatever the case, Cain and Abel brought their offerings to the Lord. But the wording here is very, very important. Okay, verse 3 says, Cain, quote, brought some of the fruits of the soil as an offering. Verse 4 says, quote, in contrast, but Abel brought fat portions from some of the firstborn of his flock. All right, see the difference. Some of the fruits as compared to what? Fat portions of the firstborn. The whole spirit and tone of this passage does not indicate to me that this was a difference between little Susie, who brings a beautifully crafted handmade birthday card to her mother, and little Johnny, who brings misspelled words and stick figures. Okay? This was not the difference in ability. It was not even the difference between vegetables and animals. Okay, rather, may I suggest that these offerings are a reflection of their spiritual bent, their spiritual disposition. It's an indication of their inner journey. It's a telltale sign of their relationship with God. It's a barometer of the attitude of their heart. And my friends, even though this happened at the beginning of known time, it is no less true today for you and me. Okay, we're going to get into this more, but let me just challenge us here at the very beginning. The offerings and the sacrifices of your life are a reflection of your spiritual disposition. The offerings and the sacrifices of your life are an indication of your spiritual journey, a telltale sign of your relationship with God, and a barometer of the attitude of your heart. It's no different. Can you imagine what this was like back when Cain and Abel were struggling through this? Can you see it? Can you see Cain kind of rifling through his garden, thoughtlessly grabbing a head of lettuce and a few carrots and a couple scrawny radishes? An act born more from a sense of duty or a contractual obligation, a half-hearted attempt to fulfill his side of a relationship. It's what I call a selfish offering, which is kind of an oxymoron. Cain's offering had all the fingerprints of a person who just didn't quite get it. There's a definite spiritual disconnect happening on the behalf of Cain. And perhaps a person trying to desperately offer God something but doesn't realize that his heart has to be connected as a part of the equation. On the other hand, can you imagine Abel? Can you see him out in his flock trying to find the fattest, cutest, most pure firstborn lamb? The one that would have offered him the most satisfaction and the most intimacy and the most meat, he offered to God. The one that would have won the blue ribbon in 4-H, he offered to God. The first lamb that was ever born to his flock, he offered to God. Just imagine walking across our little street here and picking out the cutest, most cuddly, perfect, cleanest, fattest little lamb over there and saying, God, that one's yours. I'm not going to keep it for myself. It's yours. We also get a glimpse into Abel's offering from Hebrews 11. You remember that one? Here's what verse 4 says. By faith, Abel offered God a better sacrifice than Cain did. By faith, he was commended as a righteous man when God spoke well of his offerings. And by faith, he still speaks, even though he's dead. For me, this whole verse revolves around two words, faith and better. Or maybe you remember the old King James saying it as more excellent. First, Abel's sacrifice was motivated, and that's what we talked about at the very beginning. There was this internal motivation. It was motivated by a deep faith in the one he was offering the sacrifice to. Abel was actually being reciprocal in his relationship with God. He was giving back out of faith and love to a God that had given him so much. And I think we can safely conclude that in contrast, Cain's offering came from a place other than faith. Perhaps his actions and his offering stemmed from a place of wanting to appease God rather than to truly love him and worship him. I think we can safely say that Cain lacked faith when he gave his offering. The word better brings with it the idea of magnitude, more than expected, utmost, abundantly, over and above, and without measure. As compared to all of the antonyms for that same word, little, less, small, and inferior. Again, words that, yes, described an outward offering, an outward sacrifice, but more so described the condition of the heart from which the offerings came. And we all know that God ultimately looks where? At the heart. The title of classic devotional book by Oswald Chambers comes to mind when I think of Abel. My utmost for his highest. Abel brought it all and then some. He left it all on the field. Abel held nothing back. Abel's sacrifice mirrored his passion. Abel was completely and totally abandoned to God. His offering could be nothing less. And this incensed Cain. Oh my goodness. Cain was really angry. To know that God's favor was on his younger brother and not on him put him into a rage. Cain wasn't even able to see that God was not playing favorites here. Cain refused to grasp that his own motives and his own actions were at the root of God's disfavor. And I can't even imagine this, but Cain let the first sibling rivalry in history get extremely out of control. Cain, the elder brother, could not stand to be in the shadow of his younger brother, and again, unwilling to admit that the shadow over his head was not caused by Abel, but it was caused by this own black cloud hanging over his head. And even before he took Abel out into the field, God sensed his envy and his rage. And God entered the conversation. Okay? Even in our anger and rage, we need to keep the door open to God's conversations, my friends. Okay? God entered the conversation, and we should be very glad that he did. He said to Cain, "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what's right, won't you be accepted? But if you don't do what's right, sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must master it." Don't you love it when God initiates conversations? Why are you so mad, Cain? Why are you so mad, Gerald? Why are you so mad, Chase? Why are you so mad, Bill? Okay, your face tells it all. What's going on the inside? Okay, you know what you were supposed to do. You know that I wanted you to bring an offering and how you were supposed to bring it. There's a right way to do this and there's a wrong way to do this, Cain, and you chose the wrong way. And now, even more sin is crouching at your door. I'll explain this in a second. It desires to master you, but you must master it. In other words, what's going to happen next, Cain, doesn't have to happen. Okay? The disposition of your heart right now has caused a crack in the door, and more sin is just outside there, waiting to come in. Okay? But Cain, this can be diverted. Envy and rage can be dealt with before you do something that you don't regret. Now here's where Cain did something a little bit different than his mom and dad. Remember, mom and dad were tempted to cover up their bad by doing good. Here's what Cain did. He covered up his bad by doing more bad. Covering up our bad by doing more bad is nothing short of absolute denial of what's happening. Cain was deceived by thinking that the problem was somebody else, not his own heart. And I cannot even imagine, my friends, what the first murder was like. We're kind of numb to it now, aren't we? We hear it all the time. In fact, we watched the evening news last night for the first time in months. And Julie's like, I don't like this. Now I'm worried about stuff. Because we heard about, these random murders in Nashville. And we've kind of become numb to it. But I can't even imagine what it was like for Adam and Eve and for Abel to be a part of an act that was so heinous, so violent, so brutal. An attack of a brother on brother where one is left beaten and limp and lifeless while the other sinks deeper into despair and denial. I can't even imagine the agony of Eve, the mother, losing one son to the hand of another. Talk about drama. This thing got out of hand really quick. But the graciousness of God steps in again. God continues a conversation with Cain. He asks, where is your brother Abel? Okay, we're all aware, right, that God doesn't ask questions to get information. Okay? He asks questions to expose us. He asks questions to crack open our hearts. And God gives yet another chance for Cain to come clean. But Cain gives an answer that is perhaps the lamest of all answers. An answer that confirms just how messed up things can get when sin masters us. I don't know. I don't know? Really? That's the best answer you can give me, Cain? I don't know? And we might be kind of chuckling on the inside, but in our heart of hearts, I know I've let those cowardice words dribble past my lips a time or two in my life. When God starts a conversation with me and convicting me about something, I just kind of like shrug my shoulders and go, how'd that happen? I don't know. Okay, it's spoken by the little kid with his hand in the cookie jar. Johnny, is your hand in the cookie jar? I don't know. You know? To a teenage son or daughter, you know, why were you home so late last night after curfew? I don't know. Right? Spoken all the way to the President of the United States when Bill Clinton was testifying before a grand jury about his relationship with Monica Lewinsky back in the mid-90s, if you can actually remember that. I actually looked up the transcript online of that hearing, and it's astounding how many times that man said, I don't know, I don't recall that, I don't think so, I don't have any recollection of that, I'm just not sure. I stopped counting at 50. I don't know. May I suggest that we do know? Of course we know. We are all aware of the demons that stalk us. We are all aware of the sin that is crouching at the door trying to master us. We all know of our own unwillingness to verbalize what haunts us. And when we are unwilling to be vulnerable and transparent like that, we just give the lamest answer that has stayed with us since the beginning of time. I don't know. Cain was closed up. He was impenetrable. He refused to navigate his own heart when someone else unintentionally made him look bad by his obedience and passion for God. Cain and Abel have passed down something to each of us as a part of our spiritual heritage. They passed down through the millennia the option of two spiritual dispositions: a bent and a passion toward God, or a bent and a passion for our own selves. Times when we experience undulations of them both. I'm sure our lives have been through a roller coaster where we kind of experience both of these things at different times. There are times when our passion for God soars, when we want to offer nothing less than total abandon to Him. Times when we don't even think twice about offering Him the fattest juiciest lamb from our flock. Times that we live in such a state of faith that we hold nothing back. Our time, our emotions, our money, our vulnerability, our skills, our service, our worship, our love, our honesty, ultimately our heart. And then there are those moments, and hopefully they become fewer the longer we walk with God, but those times when we throw him leftover scraps from a garden that has filled our own stomachs first. Moments when envy and rage are thrown like daggers toward a brother or sister in Christ who is basically making us look bad. That's not their intention. But in a world where we are constantly comparing ourselves to others, there's always that possibility that her utmost for his highest is making me feel extremely uncomfortable, maybe even guilty. And so we do the only reasonable thing. We try to snuff her out. She's making us look bad. And then there are those moments when we play totally ignorant of what we really know what's going on. And the words, "I don't know," dribbles past our lips. Abel passed down to us passion and faith and total abandon. He passed down to us a relationship with God that is exceptionally generous toward him. A life that didn't count penny for penny, but a life that went beyond measure. Cain passed down a very ugly false self. Anger, envy, and the ability for us to say, "I don't know" at the drop of a hat. My friends, we are all on a journey of transformation. God did not save us just to twiddle our thumbs and wait around until he makes everything new someday. He is in the process of making you new right now. That is the process of spiritual formation. But my fear, I have two fears, and here's what I'm going to end with. One of my fears is that the majority of Christians, especially in this country, are satisfied with being somewhere in the middle of those two options. They wouldn't consider themselves living a life of radical passion and discipleship, intentional faith, and total abandon. But neither are they committing murder based on jealousy and rage. They wouldn't consider themselves hot, but neither would they consider themselves stone cold, right? Somehow, that is supposed to sound right. Are you catching my drift here? What did Jesus tell the church of Laodicea in Revelation 3? He said, "I know your deeds. I see what you're doing. I know the motivation behind your deeds, that you are neither what? Cold nor hot." Oh, and then this one just blows me away. "I wish you were either one or the other. So, because you are lukewarm, not hot or cold, I am about ready to spit you out of my mouth." Wait a minute. Jesus wants us to be either here or here? You know, come on, isn't there an option to be in the middle? That human reasoning kind of gives us a little bit of, a little bit of an excuse, a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of soothing of a conscience in a human way. And what Jesus is telling the church of Laodicea in Revelation 3 is the same thing that his Father has been talking about throughout all of Scripture. Okay? Okay? The book of Joshua, choose you this day whom you will serve. You know, this one or this one? Not somewhere in the middle. Jesus, a man cannot serve two masters. It's impossible. Oh, but we think it is. So we will find that middle ground where it kind of makes us feel like we're not hot or cold, we're not totally bent away from God, but we're not totally bent to ourselves either. My friends, that is human reasoning. The scriptures speak. It's either this or it's this. And my other fear is this ripple effect that God spoke to Cain about. He said, but if you do not do what is right, sin is crouching at your door. Deep down in, I think Cain knew what he was supposed to do. And he chose not to do it. This was not a matter of ignorance or not knowing. You know, it's not a matter of the kid raising his hand in the classroom and saying, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the instructions. No, Cain knew. And this was sin at a basic, catch this is so important. This was sin at the basic level of a sacrifice that revolved more around Cain than around God. An offering that felt partial, obligatory, half-hearted, and faithless started this horrible ripple effect, more like a tsunami or an avalanche. And when we don't do what is right at that basic level, the level of the posture of our heart and life, when it comes to, you know, am I willing to sacrifice and offer to the Lord what I need to, or am I not? When it comes down to that basic level, if we choose not to do that, that means there are a host of whole other sins just crouching at your door, waiting to make their entrance. We have to get our hearts right at that basic level of offering and sacrifice. Paul went even to a greater degree in Romans 12:1, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Do you want to shut the door to all of those crouching sins? Then slam it shut with a heart like Abel's. Total abandon. A heart that says, I'm all in God, whatever it looks like. And most of the time, from my experience anyway, it doesn't look like anything we imagine. Okay, Jesus told Nicodemus that the wind of the Spirit blows wherever he wants to, and that we are to follow the wind of the Spirit. And a lot of times that just doesn't look like how we imagining life to turn out. Okay, that doesn't mean that your life has to look like mine or my life has to look like yours. Please remember what we talked about several months ago in our Family Talk series about personal vision. All right? God is calling you to abandon your life to something for the kingdom. And that may not be what he's calling me to do. Our lives are going to look different. We each have a specific part to play. And that may not always turn out the way you think it should. But the most important thing is, what is the disposition of your heart? What is that bent? And if we've got a heart like Cain, there's a whole bunch of sin crouching at your door, just waiting to rush in because of your life that revolves more around you than around God. But if we have a heart like Abel, who is saying, okay, God, I'm all in. I'm abandoned. I have a passion for you. I'm seeking you. I will give you my all. I will give you the fattest, juiciest lamb. Take it. It's my pleasure. That door stays shut. Let me close with the words of Oswald Chambers. I mentioned his book earlier. If you've never had a chance to grab that little devotional that's stood the test of time, all right, not many do. That one has stood the test of time. Pick it up. It will challenge you. Here's what Oswald Chambers said. He said, I must learn that the purpose of my life belongs to God, not me. God is using me from his great personal perspective, and all he asks of me is that I trust him. And once you get to the point of total surrender to him, you will be the most surprised and delighted person on earth. God will have you, absolutely. God will have you without any limitations, and it is then that he will really give you your life.